Hey there, YouTubers. So you've probably seen on the channel, done tons of benchmarks. Initially had hoped to get i9 13900K, but we ended up with the i5 13600KF and the i7 13700K. So I wanted to give you my thoughts on 13th gen. Now, been dealing with computers for a long time. Um, But if we look back recently, going from 8th gen to 9th gen, 10th gen to 11th gen, this has really been, in my opinion, like the biggest step, this 12th to 13th gen. Um, Performance has been great, but things that I thought would work not necessarily work as well with 13th gen as they might work with 12th gen. And definitely not as good as those things have worked with 10th and 11th gen or 8th and 9th gen. So, what have I learned about Intel's 13th gen? All right, let's look at it. Motherboards. You may want to look for ones that are either Z790s or the future 700 series. If you're looking at Z690, H670, or B660, look for one that has the ability to get the BIOS updated via USB without a CPU or GPU installed, right? So what's your option there if you don't do that? Well, you either have to buy something like a Celeron G6900, Pentium G7400, one of the cheaper 12th gen CPUs, update the BIOS on your motherboard, and then go back and install your 13th gen chip. Other solutions would be to take it to a PC store and ask them if they can update the BIOS. I'm not aware of any mail-in services, though I have seen on eBay there is one individual that has posted a service that you could get done. Um, Costs you shipping, return, and a small fee, but that didn't look too bad. All right, so these motherboards are expensive, significantly more than the initial offerings for 12th gen. And, right now, you've only got Z790 for the 700 series. Eventually, you'll see some of the other motherboards come in. Whether there'll be much benefit to buying those is another story. With 13th gen, completely avoid H610M or any of the super cheap motherboards out there from the B660Ms that you might find from ASRock. Those are going to be complete garbage. And basically what you're wanting to avoid and why you're avoiding the H610Ms. You're going to have low quality VRMs, non-existent heat sinks, and or weak power stages. So you can kind of look at a motherboard of good high quality, something like an Aorus, Gigabyte Aorus brand, where you'll see a big old heat sink. And then you can go around and look at the VRMs and just kind of get a feel for the difference between a really cheap motherboard and the more expensive one. So really looking at the different 600 boards that are available that would be solid. Usually the B660 that start at $160 are going to be good. Something like the Gigabyte Gaming X that I have, Asus TUF B660M, which is around that 160, 180 price range. What is it? The Tomahawk, MSI Tomahawk. I don't have one of those for this series, but I had one in the past. Now the Z690s, stay away from the super cheap Z690s, and I would say that include Asus Prime. I've had nothing but problems with my Z690P, which one of those is DDR5 motherboard, but it's just not quite cutting it for overclocking and other stuff. And of course, Z790s may be your best bet because of the additions they've made there, and that is going to be compatible right off the bat with your 13th gen. So there are a lot of other things we could have talked about with motherboards. Let's talk about CPU coolers. So specifically, if you had the i5 13600KF, which we do, you'll find, there's a decent selection of CPU coolers that will work with this CPU, whether it be the 13600K or KF. So I had decent results with the Noctua NHU14S. It's a single tower, 140 millimeter, going up to something like a Noctua D14 or D15, or the clone like Thermalright Frost Commander that you may have seen on the channel. So, depending on which one you get, you'll see varying levels of capability. You should be able to find, you'll be able to overclock definitely with the bigger towers, dual towers, dual fans. Benchmarks of these things are significantly greater than the i5 12600K, but temps, are higher than that as well. And you will find temps are relatively low in gaming. It's just when you're running benchmarks, and you're probably not going to find a program out there that will make your CPU hotter than Cinebench R23, as it takes at least 10 minutes to run that. So moving on. Now, if you're looking for a CPU cooler for the i7 13700KF, air coolers, well, any of the ones that I have had, folks, have thermal throttle during Cinebench, and I spelled that wrong. Nice thing about the way I've set this up, I can just edit that. Oh, no spelling error. So, as you've probably seen, if you've watched my videos, every i7 13700K benchmark with any of my air coolers has thermal throttled. Now, you can get rid of that by undervolting, and you can even overclock with undervolting. So that is honestly, maybe the only way to go with those bigger air coolers. Now, I started this list at basically the Noctua D14, D15 range, Thermalright Frost Commander. Deepcool's got what, the AK620 out there, and the I think it's Ninja Assassin or whatever the hell that big monster's called. Those are other CPU coolers that you could look at. The thing is, though, that you'll see the wattage spike up to about, I think it was 280. So good luck finding an air cooler that really can keep that cool, right? I think that one by Deepcool is supposedly 280 watts. Ideally, you'd find one that was about 320. Now, you stuff that thing in a case, who knows how good your performance is going to be. You'll see all the benchmarks on this channel have been done outside of a case. So like I said, you can overclock with an undervolt on those air coolers. Benchmarks, which surprised me, they were greater than the i9 12900 with the CPU. Heck, the i5 might have been greater than the i9. I'll have to go back and look at that. Temps were rather low during gaming, and definitely with the undervolt, they're really low. So most people, that have had positive takes with the i7, they've been using water coolers, right? So to hit all the boxes, to be able to do the benchmarks, to not thermal throttle during benchmarks, and to be able to do the overclocking and the gaming, sounds like a water cooler. Now, potentially there might be some undervolting in there. Yours truly only does air coolers, so don't quote me on any of that, but most of the viewers have been recommending 280 to 360 millimeter AIO. In a moment, after we get done with this, I'll show you some stuff that I bought that we'll be having on the channel soon. CPU cooler. Now, if you have the i9 13900K or KF, I can't give you any personal results from that. Air cooler results are going to be worse than they were at the i7, right? I mean, it's just going to be hotter. You might as well forget about an air cooler and just go straight to the water cooler. I would expect you have to do undervolting with the CPU, even with water cooling. But I don't know when I'll get an i9 in on channel, folks. We may have to skip that and just save the money for the lock CPUs when they come out, or buy some AMD stuff. Undervolting. All right, so you may have seen one of my more recent 13th gen videos that's been a little more popular. We didn't really talk a whole lot about undervolting, and I just kind of, barbarically went through it. without really telling you anything about what I was doing, except I was undervolting it. And what does it mean? Basically, decrease the voltage reaching the processor and CPU with the goal of maintaining stability. And there's a lot more to that definition, but I think that's kind of a simple way to look at it. Benefits: cool down CPU temp, reduce thermal throttle. Right. So if you watched any of the videos, you'll notice we went from hitting 100 degrees Celsius to keeping it under that with a undervolt. And the more you go down, the cooler it gets, but at some point it may become unstable. We'll talk about that here shortly. So may be able to get away with using existing CPU cooler without upgrading. That's always a nice thing, right? Had I just went straight to that, we probably would have just stuck with a Noctua D15 instead of buying this ginormous ice giant siphon, whatever it's called, $146 later on that. Now, you can also do, I say it can be done from XTU, throttle stop, you can do it from. The problem is if you have a shitty motherboard that they've locked you out of XTU, the only place you could do this is your BIOS, if it even works in there. So this thing with 13th gen, just not necessarily compatible with all of these 600 series motherboards. But if you've got a good motherboard, surprisingly, my MSI Pro Z690 is pretty solid. It's let me do all this stuff, where my ASUS stuff and my ASRock just, I'm ready to sell them. And matter of fact, some of them are up for sale already. Negatives, all right. So negatives: undervolting, possible performance loss. Well, if you're already thermal throttling, I don't know that you're really getting too much performance loss, but when you compare it to a system that could actually be cooled, then you would say, yeah, there's some performance loss there. Undervolting, versus the CPU that has a CPU cooler that you do not need to undervolt. Instability, you guys probably have all seen this with blue screens. More likely you'll see blue screens when you screw around with overclocking and you're not doing all the settings right. But just a mild undervolt, I don't know, it doesn't seem to be too bad. And supposedly this could affect the lifespan of certain components in your computer. Whether it will or not, I don't know that we're going to do it long enough here to find out, but there is always, if undervolting was the cure to everything, then the manufacturers, would automatically set the voltage lower, right? So there's obviously reasons why they don't do it. But it's up to you whether you do it. Can't say I recommend it because I don't want you to blame me. Let's move on, folks. So those CPU frames, I probably should have thrown a picture on here, but most of you know what they are. You've got the cheap ones from Thermalright, and then you've got Thermal Grizzly has like a $46 one. And supposedly you can see an 8 degrees Celsius benefit, or you might not. They may not all be created equally, so you can't say that the Thermalright is probably as good as the Thermal Grizzly one. Or maybe they are. My test of the Thermalright model exhibited no change in temps with i5 13600KF. I almost felt like I had a improvement with the i7 13700K, but I haven't yet sat down and officially tried to figure it out. So it may work, it may not. I can't say I recommend it, except here's one reason I recommend it. Dependent on your cooler, it definitely looks way neater to have that on there than the ugly system that Intel has put to pull your CPUs out, okay? So that may be up your alley. Now, I wouldn't be surprised one day they rig those up with ARGB and do other things to it. Maybe add some additional, cooling, figure out a way to help cool the CPU from the side. I don't know if they could do it, but there may be other things I could do. Moving on. So expensive, right? 13th gen. Oh my God. You know, price is higher than any previous generation. I'm sure that'll be the case for the locked processors when they come out. That i5 13600KF started at 309 is definitely the value of the whole class, folks. You may find, honestly, because of the headaches associated with these other ones and the more expensive CPU cooler, do you really need to buy those 13700Ks or 13900K? Most likely you don't. If you got an RTX 4090, I'm thinking, you know, maybe you need the i9, but the rest of you probably don't need it. Hell, I don't even think I need it, and I'm doing all these videos. I'd probably have been better off instead of buying the i7, buying the Ryzen 5, whatever it is, 6600. Hell, I already forgot the name of it, but you guys know what I'm talking about. So, you know, this is an Intel channel. We don't really care about AMD, but, you know, that might have been a better thing for the channel. Now, currently, the i9 13900K is selling for over $700. So, where I had a chance of picking it up for $650, and now I'm like, no, I'm not going to do it. And, you know, I don't know that I have a cooler that can handle it. You realize, you know, cooler's going to cost you at least $100 for these, if not double that. And then throw in that CPU frame, 1440 to 46. This is, you know, considerable investment. Plus the good motherboard, at least $230 if you want a Z790. And to buy a decent quality Z690 is probably going to set you back about $200. So let's talk about the other stuff, folks. Let's see. Well, we got one more thing. Oh yeah, Windows. Is it urban legend that you need Windows 11 to get the most out of 12th and 13th gen? I saw no difference between benchmarks. Okay, I've already had multiple people tell me, "Oh, you've got to use Windows 11, otherwise it's not going to, you know, take advantage of blah 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 cores." Folks, I think it's urban legend. If it really works, you know, I don't know. But bigger YouTubers, you know, if you watch their channels, and most of you do, somehow you ended up on this crap channel. And, you know, those guys show that Windows 10 is better in a lot of benchmarks than 11, if not all the benchmarks. So let's talk about what else I have coming to the channel. And you see I had to do a little research there. Bought myself, folks. So I bought this here motherboard, and I think this is going to be a good one, folks. Z690 Aorus Elite AX. You can just look at it. It looks pretty solid. You know, DDR5, which is good because I'm really not happy with my current DDR5 motherboard. So I feel like I'm wasting my RAM. I want to say this is PCIe 5.0 as well. Yeah, 5.0. We don't even need that right now, but DDR5, we definitely need. And I'll do an unboxing of this. I look forward to using this. I'll run all my benchmarks again. If you guys weren't tired of the benchmarks, you will be by the time I get this. And hopefully, you know, this will knock it out of the park. When I get this, I do plan to probably get rid of at least one of my other motherboards. Now, in addition, I decided to buy, which one is it? Yeah, this one, which was cheaper than what's shown. Arctic Liquid Freezer 2. There was a really cheap one, but I didn't have a lot of confidence that that was going to get done. So we're going to try this one. We'll see if it works. If it doesn't, you know, you'll know from the channel that I wasn't happy with it. But there you go, folks. Not a bad idea, I think, to at least invest in this, and we'll see how it goes. At least I'll have something to compare all three of the big coolers that I have to include this one. We used to have a V20 360 You know, sadly though, that quality of that was not that good compared to other brands. But this is, you know, this should be a decent pickup for us, and we'll try it out with the i5 and the i7. Thanks for checking out the video, folks. Please like, please subscribe. Thank you.